Suzy Wrong,
Hi,
thanks for joining us at
thanks for
StageMilk.
having me.
You're a theatre reviewer or critic here in Sydney. How did that start?
It started because I was very enthusiastic about seeing plays and then talking to friends about it. So I found myself really good at telling people, oh, you got to see that, why have you got to see that? You know, I was really good at expressing that. And at the same time, I was working on websites and things as my day job for a long time. So I knew how to create a website, how to do the blogging thing. I thought I'll just put these two things together. So I started making a blog without knowing that there was a thing called a theatre review blog. So automatically, it became a thing that I was doing just for fun. And I thought, maybe if I did this really well, and then maybe in 10 years, people would take me really seriously and give me free tickets to see shows. But in like 2 weeks, like these tickets were just coming at me. There was so much demand for people to talk about the work that people were putting up, you know. Obviously, these were really small groups, independent shows, and they wanted the feedback, and I just kind of took it on thinking, wow, this is great, such good fun, right? So it was how it started.
It's funny that you mentioned that because essentially that was the origins of StageMilk as well. We were all just trying to get free tickets to the theatre. But then it kind of exploded into something else. One of the things that I'm interested in is negative reinforcement. Do you think there's any value in negative reviews?
I don't really know what's a negative review, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because you kind of go, rarely do you go in saying, don't see the show. I don't believe I've ever done that. You go in trying to pick things apart, and right, if the show's not working, trying to figure out what's wrong with it, and you talk about that a little bit. You don't kind of go in sort of, that's not my style anyway. And because it's also a constant reminder that you're there to encourage people to do theatre and watch theatre. And if you ever get into that position where you're trying to discourage people from going to see or discourage people from doing theatre, you've got to be really careful. And well, I think I very rarely do that. I try to keep sort of a really encouraging tone, even if it's a poor work, and you say, you know, the problem with that was this, the problem with that was that. Not that the problem wasn't that people went and made it.
But it's constructive in a way.
I guess. I don't really know what constructive criticism is, because when I'm writing it, I'm focused so much on understanding what went wrong. So that's what I do. And how people, whether it's constructive, is how people take it, I think. It's how people interpret my words and my intentions.
And so for you, what is the most important element for creating successful theatre?
So many things. You can never boil it down to one thing, because theatre is such a big thing and it can be so diverse. You know, you can be just a person singing for an hour, or it could be someone, taking a whole group of refugees talking about their experience. It's such a big, wide, different thing. But I guess, and it feeds very nicely with the acting experience, is a sense of truth. It's a weird thing because so much of what we do is create illusion and create fantasy. But I guess it is about resonance, about the person watching there, and you can sort of connect with them in some way. And, as a reviewer, I also have to be very aware that you can't connect with everyone. I don't believe that's one work that can connect with everyone. So it's not one thing, it's all kinds of things, but it's a sense of truth and I think a sense of generosity is really important for people who are standing on stage or doing a show. There are two kinds of actors I've identified. There's one kind of actor who loves the adoration and the attention. And I think that's really important for any actor to want to be looked at. But for a lot of actors, it stops there. And the better actors, they understand like a reciprocity of it, that you're there because you have this need to be admired or whatever, but you also need to love to tell a story. And I think that's one of the big differences between a poor actor and a great actor, is someone who's able to give you so much while requiring you to, admire them.
That's really fascinating, because I think that need to be, or desire to be looked at and watched and to entertain is something that we don't really talk about, because it seems like it's
That's really silly. That's like the fundamental thing of why people get into theatre. Because if it's not that, then you can write a play, you can direct a play, you can do the lights, you can do the sound. But the whole point of you getting on stage, you cannot hide the fact that you want to be looked at. And you don't necessarily have to look at it as a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I like being looked at, just, in different ways. And people have to, and actors have to be really, really honest, really, really honest with what they want to do. And then when it's out there, and people shoot you down if they have to, but then you learn from it, and that's how you become a better actor.
So you've talked about truth and honesty. What actually is that? How can you tell when an actor isn't being truthful compared to when they are?
I don't know. I think it's just my instinct. It's such a, I guess that's the hugest question, right? How do you get to the truth? But I would say it's instinct. I don't believe that you can. I don't believe that the words can describe it. People have written books about, how do you get to that and all that. But some of those words might work for certain kinds of actors, some of it won't. I think, in terms of theatre, I don't know about other sort of film and TV and all that. But in terms of theatre, there's a sense that if you're rehearsing or in a rehearsal room or in a theatre, in an auditorium, when you know that you're bullshitting, that you can feel it. And if you can't feel it, acting is not for you. Yeah?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
If you can't feel the energy in the room, acting is not for you. And if you can't cope with the negative things that critics say, then acting is not for you.
Brutal. But
it is brutal.
But true.
But it's nowhere near as brutal as the commercial realities of it, right? Like, I can say what I want, but it's just the words of one person. But if you can't feed your family, then that's quite a different thing.
So what is the value of working in the independent space for actors, do you think?
The greatest value of working in an independent space is you're going to be able to say anything you want, because you're not relying it to pay your bills, and no one there is paying enough money for you to be there, as like a valid commercial thing. You're there because of passion. Some people will think of it as a stepping stone, obviously. But while you're in that space, you don't owe anyone bullshit. You don't owe anyone any shit. You have to do what's right for you, which means it allows you to say what you want to say and do what you want to do and be really experimental. The problem with people thinking of independent theatre as a stepping stone thing is they go in and they start pandering. And I think that a lot of performance is entertainment, and entertainment you have to pander. But within that independent space, you should be able to give yourself that license to kind of go, I'll try this, maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't be good, but like, who do you owe, No one's paying your bills, and if you feel like that's authentic to you, and that's exciting to you, and that's where your passion is, that's where you can do it. Because once you start, selling your skills for money, then, it's not your space to decide what you want to do, really.
Yeah, so time on stage, freedom to take risks, gain experience, start to understand that relationship between audience and performer.
Yeah, and maybe find what is it that you love most about it. Because I think, especially for young actors, you don't really know what it is until you've done it anyway. Like when your exposure to it, you might see a lot of theatre, you might not see any theatre, but you have to go through it to understand it from the perspective of being an actor. Oh, this is what I'm actually doing. To change it from like a abstract concept to something that you actually know and feel, and you go, oh, I really like this thing. Oh, I don't really like that thing.
I think that's really important, and probably one of the things that we don't talk about enough either is that even if you want to be an actor, you're allowed to have things that you like doing and things that you don't want to do. So there's always choice there, isn't there? I think we give away our agency when we think, oh, I want to be a professional actor, so I'll do whatever comes my way.
Seems to be. It's with any job you do, any career, I believe. As soon as you're in there for money, and the bigger the money gets, the more you have to negotiate those questions. But integrity is always important. I mean, how much money do you need? And how much? I guess it's different for everybody. Like, how much is your integrity worth? It's easy to sell your integrity, I guess, but everyone's got a point where they won't be able to do it anymore, I believe. But I guess there are some people who can just do it just for the money. Maybe there are those people, I don't know.
It's not me or you, I don't think. I'm certainly not doing it for the money. Do you think that there are some stories that should be told that aren't being told on Australian stages?
I think we're not doing too badly in that way, and I don't think we are sort of a culture that hides our taboos. We do have a lot of people who are eager to come out and talk about things. And at the moment, anyway, the climate is really about talking about things. Everybody wants to be woke. Everybody wants to be really like, people have a fear of being ignorant, which is great. I do think that, our problems with the Aboriginal community is very urgent. And the problem with that is our art, our theatre, is by and large run by white people because it's been like that for many years. And if this sort of a group of white people want to talk about race relations, then it will always become really tricky because it will always be white people talking about race.
Yeah.
How do you get other people? Because it's essentially about talking with other races, right? So you can't just have white people talking themselves about race. But how do you get other people to participate with it? That's a tricky thing because, do they want to talk to you about race? It's not all about what you want. Do brown people, do black people, do yellow people want to talk to you? Are they interested in talking to you? So that's one of the things about theatre. They say, there are not enough Aboriginal actors around for us to cast them. There are not enough Asian people around to cast them, which is fair enough. But also, sometimes I think, maybe that's because they're not interested in talking to you. Maybe they're not interested in creating the art that you want to do. So I think I like to see the theatre as an art form that can go out to people of color more, my culture, I'm sort of like an Asian type culture, and that there is that cliche of we bring up our kids to be either accountants or doctors or lawyers, and there's a lot of truth to that. We don't have a very strong culture of making art, and that's a problem. And I often wonder how do we change that, and then I'm also thinking how much of my community is actually interested in making art. So that's something that I'm very interested in.
And so do you think, kind of conversely, there are stories that are overtold? Are there stories that we see too often?
Well, I only think about Shakespeare. You only have to think about Shakespeare and you think, what is that about? What is that about? Aside from not having to pay rights, right? What the hell is that about? Why do you have to do those stories again and again, you know? Why do I have to watch Macbeth 3 times a year? I've just seen Michael Fassbender do the best Macbeth, one of the best Macbeths you can see on film. Why do you have to go to an independent theatre and see a uni actor pretend to be Macbeth? What is that about? Well, why are they so drawn to it? Is it vanity? I tend to think it's about wanting to be validated. These people thinking that if I can master this thing, then you have to take me seriously. You have to take what I do seriously. And that's really stupid. I mean, to me, that's really stupid. But, obviously people have themes in there that they're really drawn to. But I can see it. I can understand why those themes are very relevant to people and why some of those stories are so important to people. But maybe it's a cultural thing. I'm not from, like a European English sort of culture. So when people do these canons of Chekhov and Shakespeare and Ibsen, to me it's just repetitive, and it's just like you can be a bit more interesting.
I love it. And I think it is about ego. So much of it is about I need to give my Macbeth, or I need to perform my Hamlet.
Yeah, so I'm not good until I can do a Hamlet.
Yeah, that's right. Do you notice a difference between actors who are trained and actors who are not trained on stage?
I think I can, but I might not be right. I'm watching plays and I'm thinking, that person needs training. But I don't know. I don't go up to actors asking them about, what have you done? I think training is certainly important, because there's some work that can just sort of rely on your God-given talents, and a lot of people have God-given talents, and your intuition. Some people are really good with that. And there's just some stuff that needs a lot of training, some stuff that's really difficult. And even trained actors can't do them, and sometimes it shows. But I don't pretend that I can tell. I don't pretend I can know. I try to look at the play as sort of objective one-off things. I always remember the time when I started going to the theatre, and I didn't know anybody. I didn't know this actor from that actor. I didn't know this company from that company. I don't know the culture around it. All I know is that 2 hours inside that moment. So even now when I'm writing the thing, I'm like, you have to be think about the person who sees a play for the first time or only sees a play a year. To them, it's not important how much work that actor's done. To them, it's not important how much training that actor's done. It's just those 2 hours in there, what happens in there. So I guess that's my approach.
That's fascinating, and such an awesome approach.
I guess it's fair as well.
I mean, that kind of objective place that you come from would suggest that there isn't necessarily, but is there a distinct difference between independent and professional theatre, do you think, in Sydney?
Basically money. Not that money is everything, but when you've got a good budget to work with.
It sort of seems like in professional theatre, paid professional theatre, is almost compromised in a way that independent theatre isn't.
Sometimes, because I guess a lot of them have more responsibilities to, like they have to fill a house, they have subscribers they've got to take care of, patrons who've been with them for 30, 40 years that they have to take care of. So that's what happens there. But I find in Sydney, a lot of them do take their responsibilities as art makers very seriously. All the professional companies, we have this culture of announcing a season, usually over the 12 months, January to December. And there'll be things in there that are transparently commercial. There'll be the 15th time that they're doing the Macbeth, like we've discussed. That to me is not very exciting, but usually there's always an attempt to be a little bit fresh, a little bit experimental. I don't think we have that big a problem here. But independent theatre, I guess anywhere would always be dealing with having to cut corners and things like that, which makes things really exciting. There's always energy because of that, because you haven't got the money, you've got to make up for it by having a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm that makes sort of independent stuff very exciting. Which, sometimes professional shows, especially those musicals that go on for 1.5 years, performances can get a bit dead. People are there, might be doing 8 shows a week. I don't know how they do it, but they have to, and you do see that they're really bored with it.
After a while, I don't know. It must be hard to keep it fresh for those.
It's such a tricky thing because when you do a film or TV thing, you get that really one good take, and you've nailed it. And it's great, but how do you do it 8 times a week? How do you act surprised? How do you get upset by the same thing 8 days a week for 1.5 years? Those people who can do it, they're obviously geniuses, and all the accolades. I think it's wonderful for them. But I also think I don't know how they do it. It's a mystery, isn't it? I think it's a mystery.
Well, I think for me, that's the difference between trained and untrained. We all instinctively have a capacity to connect to a moment, empathize with another person. But training and technique helps you do it when the instinct or the impulse isn't there, and you just go, okay, I've just got to do it. I've got to do it technically. And the audience will hopefully receive 95% the same thing. They might not get the same level of vulnerability necessarily, but they'll receive the story and
you trust the collaboration of it, because you are at the moment sort of, you feel like you're the only one up there, but really there's all this stuff that's been done by other people that's for the moment. It's not only about you, really.